Hello, family. It's your sister, Reverend Jocelyn, here, and welcome to our new season of Faith on the Journey. I tell you, it has been too long. When I first decided to end our last season, I said just a couple months off just for us to revamp the show, see how we can explore ways to better support you on your healing journey. But your sister also needed a break. She needed a break for her own healing because I have been going through some life transitions as well. And one of the things that I said to myself, I have written a book about removing the mask and sharing our story. And while recording the last season, I started to feel like I was wearing a mask and was not being transparent with you about my journey and some of the things that have been going on in my life. And that convicted me. And I wanted to take a pause so I can focus on healing. And I still am on my healing journey. But I wanted to be able to restart the show when I felt I was at a place where I could share my story with you without crying and weeping on the air. And you're like, oh, she just needs some help. We all go through it sometimes, but I wanted to be vulnerable and transparent with you about my story. And over the last year and a half, I don't know, time is flying, right? There has been a marriage that took place in my life. Yes, I did get married. And sadly, I am just now, as I'm recording this, at the end of the divorce process. In a couple weeks, by the time this airs, I will be divorced. And during this transition, I am telling you, it has been rough. It's been the most challenging time of my life. And there's a lot of lessons that I've learned from this, which I will share with you along the way. But this time last year, when I was going through the initial stages of the divorce process, I wouldn't be able to say this even on the air while recording this with you without just balling up in a little ball and crying my eyes out and all that. And I'm like, I can't record like that and talk about my situation. But I have been doing a lot of work around my own healing through my support systems, therapy, counseling. I've been practicing what I often tell other people to do, but I also understand that healing's a process. So I have not arrived, but I did want to be open with you about what I have been struggling with because this is a journey of faith and we're on this healing journey together. And so for today, I wanted to name this episode something that is very relevant to my life and probably relevant to yours. I'm calling today's episode Starting Over. We are starting a new season as it relates to this show. We are starting, for me, I'm starting a new life now, figuring out what life looks like for me after divorce. For some of you, you might be starting a new job. You might be starting a new life in a new city. Maybe you have joined a new church. Maybe starting over something that you are trying to figure out after a tragedy. Maybe it was a traumatic loss, an unexpected death. Maybe you had something that took place that has compromised your health and you're starting over. There's a number of things in life that can take place that can cause us to have to figure out this new normal. And I wanted to share some of the lessons with you that I have learned along the way as I have been starting my life over as well. And hopefully, these lessons will encourage you. So, the first thing that I believe that we will wrestle with when we're starting over is grief. Whether this is a choosing of starting over that you've done, like you chose to relocate, you chose to create a new life, or this is the result of a tragedy, regardless of what has caused you to start over, typically we're going to find ourselves losing something in that process. And when we lose something, there's typically grief associated with that loss. Now, there are two different categories of losses, if you will. There are tangible losses, and then there are symbolic losses. I'm going to share this definition from this book, and it is called Grief and loss. And it talks about the difference between tangible losses and symbolic losses. So let's look at a tangible loss. An example of that would be an object burned in a fire, an amputation of a limb, a death. Tangible loss is a permanent loss. The lost object cannot be retrieved or restored. These losses are readily identifiable and are recognized by others, typically publicly. Like, for example, if you experience a tangible loss, like a death of a loved one, everyone's aware of that. There's typically a funeral service or something that memorializes that individual, is public, and is usually recognized by all. In contrast, there are symbolic losses. This represents the loss of a role, identity, bodily function, or a relationship. Usually, a symbolic loss is not identified as a loss per se. So, we may not realize we need to take time to grieve and to deal with our feelings about it. Nevertheless, it will initiate a process of grief just as a physical loss will. I think this is important to recognize because sometimes when we are starting over, we didn't even realize that we need to grieve whatever took place in terms of what we left behind. Even when we start a new job, we might have coworkers from our previous job who we really had good relationships with, that we love, that we miss. And so there is a loss there. Sometimes it's a little bit more heart wrenching, the loss, when we are forced into a transition that we didn't ask for. And most people on the outside might not necessarily recognize you as losing something or grieving in that way. But for you, you're experiencing grief, you're experiencing that loss, and you need time to heal from that. And so I think it's important to recognize not only the direct loss, but also the secondary losses along the way. For me, when I'm saying that secondary is really the indirect losses that we experience as a result of the direct loss. For example, in me going through this divorce process, I lost life as I knew it and my living situation that changed. There was a loss there. There was a loss as relates to my church home as well, being at my church for I think it was 16 years and being planted there and needing to go through that transition for my mental health and wellness. That was a major loss for me, and that was a secondary loss due to the direct loss of the divorce. And so there's a number of losses along the way, and each of these losses that we experience, we need time to grieve those things. We want to honor that and not minimize that. And that process takes time. Later on in this season, I'm going to spend a lot more time talking about our grief journey as a whole. But I want to make sure that I emphasize that as we are starting over, that is important that we take time to grieve. So, after we recognize our grief, the next thing that I think is important for us to do is to take time for reflection, to look back over our life and say, what is the lesson from all of this? I have a coach who is amazing. His name is Andy Enriquez, and he talks about how in the loss, don't lose the lesson. And I think that's vitally important for us to take time and say, okay, I went through this transition. This was a major loss. And sometimes you might look at it as a necessary transition, but it's still some things in that chapter that's closing. And you want to look back and say, okay, what did I get from this season of life? What's the lesson in all this? How did I grow? Where could I have grown? What might I have done differently? Not from a place of shoulda, coulda, woulda, but from a place of curiosity to say, okay, where is the opportunity for growth here? God, how can I develop from this situation and be better from it? The lessons, the gems, these are things it's a tragedy to continue to repeat the same mistakes over and over again because we don't take time to reflect, to learn the lesson from the loss. So, what are the lessons that you want to take forward with you? And what are the good things that you want to take with you as well? I was reading this book and it's called Forgiving What You Can't Forget by Lisa Turquoise. Turquoise. I can't say her name. Oh, forgive me, Lisa. But she's a wonderful author. And with this, she she talks about something that I think is vitally important in terms of memories. When we are thinking back over a previous season in our lives, and maybe it was a painful experience that you've gone through that caused this transition of you starting over. She talked about how with the memories, sometimes you could be tempted to just focus in on all the bad memories from that situation. If it was a bad breakup, you're just like, oh, this was the most terrible person in the whole wide world. And just thinking everything is doom and gloom about that previous chapter in your life. Maybe it was a church situation and you had a bad breakup, quote unquote, from your church community or job, whatever it is. But she cautions us not to just throw everything out as if it was old trash and bad news. She said instead, if there were joyful memories from that situation that you are now transitioning from, they are yours to keep. Those joyful memories you can still hold on to. In contrast, those other memories that are excruciatingly painful are yours to release. And that blessed me because, yes, when you're hurting sometimes, you can't think of the good times from the bad situation that you're in, but you can keep some of those good memories. You can keep the good gems that you have. You can keep those things that make you happy, and you can choose to release the things that don't serve you, the bad memories. And releasing takes time. Particularly if trauma was involved in the situation, is going to happen over time, but you can choose to release. I think it's also important to recognize when you are reflecting that sometimes when you are in transition or starting over, there's deep pain there that's going to require healing and God's touch and support along the way. Recognizing it and reflecting and taking time to pause is important while you are healing, because I can tell you it is much easier, quote unquote, for us to try to ignore the pain, to suppress the pain, to run from the pain with our addiction of choice. For me, my addiction of choice is work. I chose that for many, many years, just throwing myself into ministry, work, 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 keep myself busy, 12-hour days. Because when you slow down and you finally think about what's going on in your life, the silence can be so loud. And your mind starts thinking about the pain and the things that you've gone through. And so you you find other ways to try to suppress it, but that does not lead to healing. At some point, you have to allow yourself to feel. You have to allow yourself time to process what you have gone through, not from a place of judgment, but just recognizing this hurt me, or this was challenging, or I'm sad, or I feel this way. And it's okay not to always be all bubbly and happy and saying, I'm too blessed to be stressed when you're going through a storm. No, you are stressed, you are hurting, you are feeling because you're human. And honoring those emotions and working with others to help you through that process is what's going to make the difference for you, which brings me to my third point. Okay, we talked about grief, we talked about reflection. Now I want to talk about the value of having a rock solid support system. And a support system can come to you in different ways. For me, while I was beginning my healing journey, and even now, because I'm still healing, I made sure that I was in therapy every week, almost every week at least, because I needed space. I needed space that was dedicated for me to get all the icky emotions out, to talk about how I was feeling, to process the lessons, to cry. And I'm not talking about just regular cry. I'm talking about the ugly snot cry. Y'all know what I'm talking about. To cry and to pray and to really just process what was going on in my life. Therapy is something that I cannot stress enough when you are going through life transitions. And as you all know, We are a Christian counseling company at Faith on the Journey, and we counsel people from across the country. And so, if you are looking for a Christian counselor to help you with your life transition, I encourage you to reach out to us. I'll put the information in the show notes on how you can have a free informational session about our services, because I am a believer of counseling is being the one thing that can really help you to navigate your journey. Obviously, we have God, so let me not say the one thing, but a vital part of our healing journey. And so I want you to make sure that you're plugged into that, because for me, therapy has really helped me to get to a place where I can see past my pain and begin to see the possibilities again for my future. More about that point in just a minute. But counseling was one. And then I also found that plugging into support groups is very helpful as well. Depending on what your transition is like, there might be a support group that's in line with what you are dealing with. I joined a support group, divorce care, to be a part of a Christian community to help me as I was navigating my divorce. There were other support groups that I plugged into as well along my process of healing. And so think about that. Is there a community of people who are also on a similar journey as me, who can empathize with my struggle, offer insight because they might be at a different phase in the process as it relates to their struggle, and they can pray for you, encourage you, walk with you, hold your hand as you're going through this. A support group can be extremely valuable, but also our friends and our family. If it wasn't for my family and my dear friends when I was going through, let me tell you, I shout out to all my loved ones who were supportive during this season. And granted, you might not feel comfortable sharing your business with everybody if you're going through a difficult season, but I also encourage you not to live on an island, even for those of us who are private. In my culture, we often say what happens in this house stays in this house. We don't talk about our business. And this is something that has been a struggle, right? Because you embedded upbringing saying don't talk about your stuff, don't talk about your business outside. But then what are you doing? You're like keeping all this stuff in your head. You're in pain, looking up at the ceiling saying God help me, not talking to anybody. That's too much. Sometimes we need to reach out and pick up the phone. And I have found that my tribe, on those days where I thought I was about to lose my mind, gave me space to talk, to share, to be vulnerable, to shout, to be angry, and all the things. You need to have a support system to help you navigate those journeys when you are struggling. So that is something that I encourage you to tap into community as you're beginning to heal. Next, number 4 is monitoring our self talk. When we are going through difficult transitions in our lives, self talk can get out of control. We can begin saying to ourselves things like, I should have did this, or I can't believe I let this happen, or why me? And before you know, you're spiraling, and the violin is playing, and you're having your own pity party, and it is rough. Now, granted, there's a balance, right? You want to express yourself, and through journaling and things, you get your thoughts out. But when you start replaying the tape, you start saying certain things, and you start beating yourself up, it actually can become destructive. My coach said something one day in one of our coaching sessions about our self-talk. He said that if someone said to us what we say to ourselves sometimes, we would be offended. And when he said that, I was like, man, he's right. Sometimes we are so mean to ourselves. We don't even extend ourselves grace because maybe we have expectations that we should be perfect, that we should know better, that we shouldn't have done this or shouldn't have done that. But listen, newsflash, we're not Jesus. We are going to make mistakes. And I think that was one of my biggest struggles, was that I felt that in the mistakes leading up to my divorce and ignoring certain flags and signs and things of that nature, that I should have known better. Jocelyn, you own a counseling company, you talk about healing, blah 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 blah. Had all these expectations for myself, but I don't walk on water. I'm not Jesus. I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. I am human. And beat myself up for the fact that I am in this situation. Is that serving me? How is that serving me? It's not serving me at all. In fact, it is causing me to regress, it's zapping my energy, it's not allowing me to move forward. So, what is the purpose here of ruminating? And having these conversations with myself and correcting the thoughts, like arresting the thoughts. Sometimes you have to speak out loud to yourself when you start saying things that are destructive and say, no, 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 I'm not doing it. I'm not going there, and correcting it in real time, arresting those thoughts, those words that you're saying to yourself because it's not serving you. I remember last week I was having a rough day. I was having one of those mornings where I was thinking about all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas about my situation, and I was angry and all the stuff. And it was distracting me. And last week, I actually was preparing for a major conference, our annual conference event for Women in the Ministry, which is an organization that I have to support women to start their ministries. And so I was planning for this huge ministry launch conference, very excited and have all this momentum, a lot of things I needed to focus on. But I found myself being very distracted by my personal situation, my personal trauma and drama. And I was getting stuck thinking about the past and thinking about, how did I let myself get in this situation? Blah, 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 blah. And I had to say to myself, no, Jocelyn, you get to choose. You get to choose right in this second. What are you going to focus your time on? What are you going to give your energy to? Are you going to give it to your past? Are you going to give it to things you can't control? Or are you going to give it to what you're doing in this moment, which is going to bear fruit right now in this place? You get to choose. There are certain things that I don't have control over. I don't have control over this individual and what they're doing, but I do have control on me right now in this moment. And I'm not going to let anybody take this control from me right now. God, I'm focusing on you. I'm choosing to focus on you. I'm choosing to focus on the things that you put me for me in this moment. I get to choose. And for me, that was huge as a trauma survivor, seeing the things that I've gone through, seeing how there were certain things where I didn't have control over, knowing that I have a choice in this moment to choose differently, to choose my thoughts, to choose to arrest the things in my mind that are not serving me and choose to focus on the things that I'm grateful for. I get to choose gratitude. I get to choose to be in community with people who love me. I get to choose my life this forward to build something that is amazing. I choose. For me, this was a game changer because it reminded me of who I am. It reminded me of the power that's inside of me. I choose. And whoever you are listening right now, you're in a situation and you are struggling. Remember, you get to choose. You don't have to stay focused on that. And yes, you might need some help along the way, but I don't want you to see yourself helpless in this situation, even if what caused you to be in this situation was not your choice. There's certain things that you can choose in this moment, and it's how you are going to respond to the situation that's in front of you. So that is a word for somebody right now. I already feel it in my spirit that this is resonating. And when we get to choose, one of the things that I chose, instead of calling this starting over, I started to reframe things. So I chose to now reframe it to new beginnings. And that's the last point I want to talk about. When we go through these life transitions, we get to choose to reframe, reclaim, and rediscover. What am I talking about here? Well, yes. Yes, I'm starting over in terms of my life, this new chapter. But with the starting over, I get to reframe it as a new beginning. I get to reclaim my life in a new way. The things that I had once released because of the situation, because of what I was going through. No, I can reclaim it, restore relationships that were lost along the way. I get to choose to do that. I get to choose to rediscover things in my life that I used to do but no longer do, or maybe discover new things that I love. Like, for example, tonight I'm going out with a girlfriend and we are going out painting and sipping, and I'm excited about that. And I've done things like, oh, hey, I like doing comedy shows, or I might take some voice lessons or discover new things that I can do. Maybe I will decide that I want to travel here and enjoy this. I get to decide in this new season of my life what I want this life to look like. It's like a blank canvas. That's how I would describe it. It's a blank canvas. And now, even though it's a little scary, right? Because it's like, oh, wait, this is this new uncertain time period in my life. It's also exciting because now you get to choose in this new chapter of starting over. You get to really think, what is it that I want with my life? How do I want my life to look 5 to 10 years from now? How am I what's in me that I can use as a gift that's been dormant, that now this is a great opportunity for me to blow the dust off of that and explore this and maybe create a new business. Maybe now, because of what you've gone through, you can start a new ministry. Maybe now you can rediscover, okay, this is something where there is a need that I can match with my experience, and I can work in this field now, start a nonprofit. I don't know. Let's be creative as it relates to this new season of life, this blank canvas that we have the opportunity to reclaim, to reframe, to rediscover the things that bring us joy. Because in the heartache, in the things that we go through, we find that there's still opportunities for joy, because our joy first comes from the Lord. And then God, even in the midst of the storm, is present with us. Is one of those things when we think about storms in our life, the physical, the natural storms. Man, when the storm is coming, it's coming. You're like, oh my goodness. Like, if you're ever driving in this, you're like, Jesus, I'm afraid. I'm like, help me get to my destination, Lord. I don't know if I'm gonna make it home. And so you're afraid in that moment when you're going through the storm. But my coach said something, and you see, I talk about my coach all the time because I love him so much. But he said that every storm eventually runs out of rain. And when we think about that, when we look at our lives and say, man, I'm in the storm, right? I'm in the eye of the storm. I don't even know if I'm going to make. Eventually, every storm runs out of rain. And no matter where you are in your life, you hold on and know that you're going to make it through the storm. And yes, there could be a little collateral damage and things on the side, and you got to, pick up the pieces. But when the new beginning starts, and when you get a chance to reclaim, to rediscover, to start this new chapter of your life, let's know that there's still joy. There's still opportunity as you have breath to do some amazing things. So I just want to encourage you as you start over this new beginning, and just know that God is with you. There's exciting days ahead. Your best days are still ahead. I know that to be true for myself, and I'm excited as I enter into this new season. And as we are starting over, I actually have an announcement for you. For those of you who are watching this episode on YouTube, I wanted to let you know that we are starting over with a new channel. I am moving us to my new Reverend Jocelyn channel. And I thank you all for those of you who have been tuning in to our YouTube channel, our existing channel for Faith on the Journey for so long. I love you. I'm grateful for you. And I'm still here. I'm just on a new channel. It's like kind of moving from channel 2 to channel 7, or whatever channel you typically watch a show on. We're just changing channels. That's it. And so if you want to stay connected, I'm going to include a link to our new YouTube channel, so you can just subscribe to it and follow me there. And if you are listening to the podcast right now, hey, you can check me out on YouTube as well, because we also have a number of other resources, particularly for women who are called to build ministries throughout the church. Every week, I have another show called Impact Woman, sponsored by our Women in the Ministry community, that is focused on supporting women who are called to create impact in the world for the kingdom of God, whether through their ministry or their kingdom business. And I have the opportunity to interview amazing women who are doing great things in ministry. And I also share a lot of tips on that channel as well for those who are called to create impact. So if you're a sister who you know that you are ready to start your ministry or scale your ministry, go ahead, subscribe to our new YouTube channel, and take advantage of all those resources over there. So that's it for this episode of Faith on the Journey. I hope it was a blessing to you. I'm so excited to be back in your presence. And I swear we are going to have such a great year together as we continue to grow, learn, and heal. And so make sure you hit the subscribe button to my new channel. And if you do like our episode and you're listening on Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave a review. Show me some love, show the community that you also are tuning in and getting value from this show, because that is what I'm committed to doing, giving you value and making sure that we provide you with resources to help you to heal. So that's it, family. Thank you again for tuning in. And until next time, you stay encouraged and you keep your faith on the journey.